Hello. Welcome to my channel. I've recently joined an art fair in Quezon City at Elements at Centris as a first-time booster, and I have to say, if it weren't for the helpful and friendly community of artists that I'm connected to, I don't think I would have gotten to that point as quickly as I would have. As someone who struggles with mental disorders that somehow limit me from speaking and socializing, being diagnosed at a young age, and having to experience significant and severe stigma from my classmates, like receiving comments like, "Why is she so quiet?" or surprised remarks like, "I can't believe she talks." Like, bruh, even if you don't know people such as I had those kinds of mental conditions, I don't think it would be fair to make those comments because it feels as if they, my former classmates, were somehow trying to mold me into their image of social conformity and normalcy of talking so much. But I'm glad that I can say at least a handful of classmates have recognized that I, without knowing I had such mental conditions at that time, am someone who speaks liberally through art. Well, to be fair, during high school I was more recognized as a nerd for math, science, and grammar, but I do remember having geeked out on shows like Steven Universe, the Powerpuff Girls, and other notable old Cartoon Network shows because they really reached a certain part of me that I haven't been able to describe. I'm sure my experience is not unique, but I grew up with a lot of support where my parents would still cherish me with much attention and affection as if I were still a toddler. So I respond to that in a way that is proportionally baby-like. Of course, I make sure not to have that on display when I'm in school events like field trips with my fellow schoolmates. That fear was just natural and a part of how it compelled me towards independent adulthood. But seeing now that I'm in a better environment where I can be with my family in however way I will to be, with a certain closed group of friends, not minding at all how I act with my parents, since, well, they are my parents after all, I think I've come to a culmination of my healing process as an adult who's just freshly graduated from childhood. I say that I'm more healed as a person because I've gone back to my hyper and makulit, or in English mischievous, ways of going about my life. Many people have commented that I'm such a precocious and well-mannered, courteous and respectful, gracious child, but I've managed to also redevelop that part of me that was really, very understatedly, excitable, enthusiastic, and zestful in a childlike spirit. Obviously, this translated well into my art. I've always wanted to do animation, but during the time I was studying for my first time in college, where I studied animation, I felt like I didn't have the skills or the portfolio and experience to really say I could be animating, or in general, doing something as creative as drawing. It really feels like a gratifying accomplishment and a gift from the universe when I see my progress and development in digital art. I have my therapists to thank, as well as my parents, sister, and even some of my teachers and my closest and most intimate friends. My art is very much influenced by Cartoon Network. I've spent a whole decade just nerding and geeking out on Cartoon Network shows, hearing the theme songs of any show, particularly the Powerpuff Girls, or watching old CN bumper ads that just made my heart whirl. It's all very interesting to see how my work has evolved and how my belief in myself to do something so out of this world, like how the old cartoons made me feel, translated into a vision that has left me feeling like I can continue supporting my own childhood dreams of making art and making things seem appealing in a way. I know that several art experts say art is not about beauty, and it's usually the most grotesque forms of art that have the most impact on viewers. But I feel with the way I've experienced art as a 2000s kid, specifically animation, I think seeing cartoons is my own personal definition of art. Please don't cancel me, top-notch fine artists. Animation, specifically cartoons catered towards children, may be cast off as an entirely shallow medium. And it just seems like child's play to others, which is not. But it has made great momentous, significant impact on me as someone who's just taking drawing as a very serious to the next level kind of hobby. Sometimes I really get disappointed in myself for not finishing animation since I'm in a new school and am studying multimedia arts, but I always tell myself that if it's something I really want to do and is meant for me, I could always do it, just not now, which is always fine. And honestly, if it weren't for my mom's help and decision to transfer schools and my own personal decision to shift to MMA, multimedia arts, I wouldn't have met friends that have made great influence on my mental well-being and have helped me change and improve my views on anything that I've encountered with them in life. Having a friend really helps, but if you're someone like me who always thought themselves as better off without friends, I wouldn't have anything to say to purposefully change your mind, because it's all dependent on the person or individual's interest and whether or not they see the people around them fit for friendship, or whether or not they see themselves as mentally ready to take on the responsibility of having a friend. Friendship takes a lot of responsibility, and many people overlook that fact. It's really encouraging when you have a friend to tell you, hey, it's okay if you're not living up to what you expected to be, or you think you're a shadow of who you have been before, because to me, you already are a wonderful and admirable ball of sunshine, a person worthy of my respect. And I'm immensely proud of you for surviving this earth up to this day. I like to incorporate a lot of angels in my portfolio of artworks because, to me, in a spiritual sense, angels have always been regarded as this untouchable force of perfected reality that seems to be the source of glory, fascination, and magic to mortals such as me. I personally see the energy of angels in a lot of the people that choose to interact with me, and maybe even if they don't end up being my friends. It is honestly an arbitrary thing to decide what you call other people on. I think I received a lot of goodwill attention from other people during the time I've struggled to speak up or assert whatever I think is even just a suggestion for a good idea. I also grew up in a religious Christian household, and even though I don't go to Sunday Mass anymore, due to the repetitive drilling of religious concepts and principles I outgrew the connection to, I still believe in for the human good principles, like principles and universal values that benefit, guide, and even bind humanity, such as helping people that seem to really need the help. If you just reached out to that person who's struggling with social anxiety or other conditions similar to that, they would have been given the chance to practice their social skills and in turn, reach personal development. Interestingly enough, that's one term I honestly used to hate as a child and as a teenager, since I was experiencing feelings of hopelessness and I was of the belief that my life and personality were eternally stagnant. I didn't join much extracurricular activity because I felt my time was better spent learning foreign languages at my own pace. I'm glad it amounted to something because my studying of Japanese in particular has, for a decade later, led me to seriously thinking and contemplating choosing Japan as a country where I can study for a master's degree, perhaps in painting, animation, or ceramics. I know I would love to support Asian education, and having already received education in Singapore, it seems to make more sense, and the decision resonates with me the more I think about the possibility of taking even higher education. I have already studied in Singapore and am studying in the Philippines, and hopefully I can study more in a well-established fellow neighboring Asian country such as Japan. I just know the quality of receiving instruction would vary and differ greatly if the lessons by the instructor were conducted in English as compared to their mother tongue in Japanese. I first went to Japan when I was 6, and I've gone there recently for the second time this year, and getting to see and observe the culture has been life-changing to me as an adult. I visited parks, zoos, bakeries, cafes, bookstores, all the good stuff that I never really get to see in the scene of my own country. Which is, honestly, I don't really complain, but it's another thing to have when you visit a more developed country. It's hard to compare both countries since we're a relatively new country, only having achieved independence from the first country colonizer in 1898, but that is not to say my father has been very fundamental in helping me develop the awareness and to be of the opinion that, hey, it is not, in fact, impossible to live a very great and even comfortable life in a country such as I am living in. I don't think I'm a weak person at all for having experienced life colored by a wild slew of mental illnesses. But I do know that it's a serious issue that I needed to take through with treatment, and one of those healing art therapies for me was taking in animation, like animated shows, and growing a patience for myself that, hey, my art is not as defined as I want it to be, and I have no guarantee it will be like that in the future, but just a simple act of drawing basic shapes and lines make me feel empowered to express myself creatively. Who cares whether people don't see simple lines or shapes as art? Who cares what other people think? I just think that drawing with pencils on paper is already enough to make me feel like I'm doing creative work. Because it is. No art is bad. It's just all about making. And I also have access to paper, pencils, paint, and a motherfucking drawing tablet and other materials. And unfortunately, there are just too many people in this world who don't even have access to all of that. Education, good parents who support you in these things, not just financially, but emotionally too. It helps to be grateful for what I have. It puts me at an edge against people who don't consciously take in the energies present in their lives. Maybe it won't matter to others how my art first started out as fragments, then it became due to the resourcefulness and creativity of the artist that it was picked up like glass pieces and it was fabricated into a reworked piece of statue. But I do have to say, regardless of whether I feel drawn to believe it or not, my art has been very much conflated and influenced by the rarity of angels in visual media. I just found it really interesting that I don't really see a lot of representation of angels, specifically childlike angels in a cartoonish style, so I guess I was itching to find out how someone like me could do that. I realize now that watching cartoons has made me hyper-analyze the personalities of characters, and it left me pining to become a character that would leave a remarkable impact on other people. But honestly, that's open to interpretation of just anybody. I myself have just decided to channel my inner baby attitude and outward baby behavior, combine it with my love for cartoons, and express it through my art. There is no one way of being, and our mind states change depending on whatever truth we experience. So thanks for spending time with me while I ramble about my inner thoughts and my inner world. And thanks for joining me on this journey of coloring and drawing my artwork.